the worst president we've ever had because he's moving the country in an authoritarian direction.
We're out here because we feel that the Constitution is under threat.
The cost of living is just skyrocketing. It just seems like a slap in the face of the American people.
We got to do something about Trump. Just cannot continue this.
On the 28th of March, anger spilled on the streets. Cities across the US looked the same. Millions of Americans protesting against the war in Iran and US President Donald Trump's actions in No Kings rallies across the United States. Large rallies took place in New York, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Washington, while about 2/3 of the events were held outside major cities. Minnesota took center stage. Its capital city, St. Paul, became a flashpoint over Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration.
Look at all these people together thinking the same thing. We need to stand up. We need to raise our voices together. That's why I'm part of Singing Resistance.
Dictatorships fall when people rise. And that's what we're doing. We're all rising up together.
We need people. We need this many people to stand up and show this administration that we are not going to tolerate what's been going on, and that we have even more people willing to speak up and show up and make their voice heard about that.
The movement's focal point, the Minnesota No Kings protest, included a variety of political and entertainment figures. Singers Bruce Springsteen and Joan Baez. And actor Jane Fonda paid tribute to Minnesota for its role in resisting the Trump administration's anti-immigration push.
Well, this past winter, federal troops brought death and terror to the streets of Minneapolis. Well, they picked the wrong city. The power and the solidarity of the people of Minneapolis and of Minnesota was an inspiration to the entire country. Your strength and your commitment told us that this is still America. And this reactionary nightmare and these invasions of American cities will not stand.
For those of us who believe in the power of nonviolent resistance, and those of you who didn't, you have shown the way with your courage, determination, and decency. Thank you, Minneapolis.
In New York, America's most populous city, tens of thousands of demonstrators rallied, including Oscar-winning actor Robert De Niro, a Trump critic who called the president an existential threat to our freedoms and security.
It's nice to share this event with so many committed people here in this room and out in the streets. And I'm proud to stand with Indivisible and all the organizations promoting No Kings. The concept of No Kings is a great rallying cry and a hugely successful as millions of us have answered the call. I support this movement 150%. Amen. But when the crowds are chanting No Kings, what I'm really hearing, as we all know, is no Trump.
That's right.
There have been other presidents who have tested the constitutional limits of their power, but none have been such an existential threat to our freedoms and security. None, except Trump.
Also in New York, Indian-American author and TV host Padma Lakshmi joined thousands to denounce President Trump's immigration policies and the war in Iran, declaring we are not a kingdom, but a land where consensus or majority rules.
Today, not as somebody who's been in the public eye, but as a mother, an immigrant, and someone who believes in the promise of this country. I've always believed in the American dream, that everyone can have a place here and contribute to our nation. But seeing ICE deployed in our cities and terrorizing our communities, including killing multiple citizens, tells me that we have trampled on that dream.
Organizers said at least 8 million people gathered today at more than 3,300 events across all 50 states, from big cities and small towns. It was the third time in less than a year that Americans have taken to the streets as part of a grassroots movement called No Kings, the most vocal opposition to Trump since he began his second term in January 2025. The first No Kings nationwide protest day came last year in June on Trump's birthday. Several million people turned out from New York to San Francisco. The second such protest was in October last year, which also drew an estimated 7 million protesters.
In addition to what's going on in the United States, we had the fastest rise of $1 per price of a gallon of gas, I think, in history. So it's really been rapid, and there's no top on it. Right now, it's continuing to go up. Meanwhile, as all these other economic factors hit our allies and other partners around the world, they're putting pressure on the administration to get this thing solved quickly and get it off the table. Because listen, virtually everyone outside of the president's, tightest circle of supporters recognized this was a war that was simply chosen by President Trump.
Just as Trump is backed by many in his Make America Great Again movement, he is disliked with equal measure on the other side of America's wide political spectrum. President Donald Trump's approval rating fell to a record low in the latest poll from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Trump's approval rating has sunk below 40%. So what does Trump's second-term approval ratings mean? How does the current Iran war compare to the U.S. 2003 invasion of Iraq? Is the U.S. ready to invade Iran? Could Kharg Island be the next front in the West Asia war? All these and more on WION WideAngle this week. Since President Donald Trump returned to the White House in January last year, his popularity has been eroding steadily among the Americans. Trump's initial decline in popularity reflected ongoing public dissatisfaction with high prices and the cost of living. Now, the war in Iran has only exacerbated these economic concerns. Polling company Ipsos found that 43% of the American public approved of Trump's handling of the economy at the start of his second term. By 23rd June 2025, the number had dropped to 35%. In February this year, at the start of the Iran war, however, only 42% of Americans had a positive view of the president. Even that mark had sagged to 40% now. Americans' view on Trump soured significantly concerning his stewardship over the economy and the cost of living, as gasoline prices have surged since the US and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. Weeks into the US military campaign against Iran, majorities of Americans say striking the country was the wrong decision and disapprove of Trump's handling of the conflict. According to the new Pew Research Center survey, 61% of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of the conflict, while 37% approve. Trump's approval rating has implications for Republicans ahead of the 2026 midterm elections scheduled to be held in November, as a low Trump approval rating would be a challenge for Republicans in key House and Senate races across the country.
You see with this past weekend, you had the No Kings rally where there was millions of Americans, some very, very large protests that were happening. And these economic factors that are the result of the war, even more so, because you saw when he took military action against Iran in 2025 in June, against Venezuela last fall, you didn't see a big dip in his approval rating. You didn't see a jump either. But this time it's different because now then you have some actual economic pain as a result of this. Approval rating going down, and the longer that strait stays closed, the longer that Others in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe, are starting to see the ramifications of this.
On the 28th of February, the US, led by Donald Trump, joined Israel in striking Iran's nuclear sites and leadership. The aim was to weaken the Iranian regime, but that did not happen. Iran retaliated, and the conflict has spread across the region and shaken global oil routes. Parallels have been drawn between the current war and the one in 2003, when the US invaded Iraq. So what happened in 2003, and how the Iraqi invasion from 20 years ago reshaped West Asia?
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people.
In 2003, the then US President George W. Bush announced the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom, a US-led coalition invasion to remove the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein from power. This was a continuation of the United States' response to the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Officials asserted that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, or WMD, and posed an imminent threat to regional stability, global security, and the Iraqi people. So the aim of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, led by the US and including troops from the UK, Australia, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Poland, was to destroy its WMDs and liberate its people from the rule of Saddam Hussein. By March 2003, Bush concluded that he had delivered an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein: leave the country within 48 hours. Several countries, including France, Germany, and Russia, objected to the move, seeing it as a build-up towards war. Saddam Hussein refused to budge, and US-led forces attacked Iraq on the morning of March 20. And within a couple of weeks, Baghdad had fallen. The toppling of Hussein's statue in Firdows Square would become the most abiding image of the Iraq War. Hussein, who had fled, was caught in December 2003. 3 weeks on from the statue coming down, the then US President George W. Bush infamously declared, "Mission accomplished." 2 decades on, Iraq continues to bear deep scars from that invasion. It was a war which left deep scars in Iraq, as it set in motion a series of events which spiraled out of control in a way no one predicted. It left a trail of death and destruction. It is estimated that 461,000 people died in Iraq from war-related causes between 2003 and 2011, and that the Iraq War cost the US $3 trillion. The war reshaped West Asia and also had a profound effect on the public's trust in politicians in the countries that launched the war. The shadow of the 2003 Iraq War looms large over the current conflict with Iran. Today, the US has embarked on what many see as another war of choice in the region. But this time, the US is up against Iraq's neighbor, Iran.
Yeah, I think some of the parallels are that in both cases it was built on fraudulent intelligence. In the 2003 Iraq, of course, it was the weapons of mass destruction, the connection between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. There was a 9/11 connection. And also the idea that we would be greeted as liberators, that we were trying to free the Iraqi people, and all we had to do is go in there and take them out and everything would be great. It's a literal physical impossibility for them to have been 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon when there had been no evidence and no actions from the previous year when it was allegedly destroyed. So it was based on complete fraudulent information.
As the war enters the second month, expectations of a potential US ground invasion in Iran are mounting. The United States is now weighing limited ground operations inside Iran, while Israel is expanding its military footprint in southern Lebanon. Reports suggest Pentagon is considering sending 10,000 more troops, adding to the 50,000 already deployed. The latest confirmed troop movements were on the 28th of March. U.S. Central Command said on X the USS Tripoli carrying 3,500 plus sailors and Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit had arrived. The Tripoli is part of Elite ARG or Amphibious Ready Group. It is considered the most versatile, flexible and lethal global response force the United States has to offer. On the 24th of March, 2,000 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, part of the U.S. Immediate Response Force, were also reportedly ordered to West Asia. The U.S. typically has around 40,000 troops spread across West Asia. This includes sailors on warships in the region and in air bases in Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria and Jordan. The Naval Support Installation in Bahrain houses around 7,000 sailors and is a 5th Fleet HQ, while Camp Arifjan in Kuwait has around 14,000 soldiers, including the 82nd Airborne.
And even 300,000 wouldn't be enough because all the advantages would go to the Iranian side, so there's no way to do something of that scale. The only thing that's even being contemplated right now is, the only thing that's been alerted is like 17,000 total ground troops, and even those are not all actual fighters. For example, the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, the 31st and the 11th, only have a single combat battalion of actual ground troops. The rest of it are support and air and naval capabilities, etc. So that's a tiny little fraction of combat troops in a country that's massively in size. So the only thing we can do is conduct a raid.
As the US-Israeli war against Iran intensifies, what once seemed unthinkable is now becoming increasingly plausible. The question is no longer whether a ground invasion of Iran is possible, but where it could begin and whether it could achieve strategic results. The US President Donald Trump has threatened to deploy ground forces to take control of Iran's key oil export terminal at Kharg Island. So where is Kharg Island and why is it important to Iran? Let's find out. Kharg Island is owned by Iran and sits across the Persian Gulf from US bases in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. The island is small, extending for 25 kilometers. It is located in the northwest of the Strait of Hormuz. Kharg Island is significant in the current scenario because it provides a seaport for exporting nearly 90% of Iran's oil products. For this strategic importance, even during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, the Kharg Island was frequently bombed by the Iraqi Air Force, and on the 13th of March this year, the US military conducted significant airstrikes, with President Trump stating they obliterated military targets on the island. While military installations were struck, the oil infrastructure was spared at that time, though it remains under threat. So, would it mean the US could attempt to seize Iran's Kharg Island now, and how would it work? There has been speculation for some time about whether US forces will at some point attempt to take over Kharg Island. If the US does decide to invade Kharg Island, then it would most likely be a temporary measure. It is most likely aimed at applying pressure on Tehran by disrupting its oil exports, at least for a limited period. America's aim from the move would be to weaken Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz and push it to meet US demands. Iran has strengthened its defenses on the island. Tehran has also accused the US of moving additional forces into the region while speaking about peace in public. Amid reports of a potential US ground assault, Iran has also issued a warning to Washington that Iranian forces are waiting for the arrival of American troops on the ground to set them on fire.
What are you going to accomplish by seizing a piece of terrain there? Because that's not going to open the strait. That's not what they need to keep the strait closed. So the other idea is maybe you'll take something deeper in the country. Maybe you'll try to go get that reprocessed material at 60% somewhere and think that you're going to get that out and then eliminate the possibility of a nuclear weapon in the future. But that's nearly impossible to do as a raid because it is so well defended and likely spread out in multiple locations. I doubt seriously they have it together. So there are a number of things you could do, but none of them would make any difference, even if successful. But most of them likely would fail and come at a high cost in blood and treasure.
Not just Kharg, there are other islands in the Gulf that could also be in America's sights. These include Larak Island, just offshore from the key port of Bandar Abbas and sitting right on the Strait of Hormuz. Then there is Qeshm, the largest island in the Gulf and 75 times bigger than Kharg, where Iran is suspected of housing underground missile and drone sites. And there are 3 islands. The islands of Abu Musa, the Greater and Lesser Tombs, form the strategic western gateway to the Strait of Hormuz. Unlike Kharg or Hormuz, they carry limited economic value, but significant symbolic and geopolitical weight. Their ownership is disputed between Iran and the UAE, but all are occupied by Iran. Taken together with other Iranian islands, these Gulf islands form a protective shield for Iran that gives it a geographical advantage.
You're never going to go back to what it was on the 27th of February, which it had been for decades before that. Now Iran has physical control of the oil, and there's no doubt in my mind that they will make sure that any kind of negotiations leaves them in control of it, because they will view that as an effective deterrent, a security guarantee of sorts going forward, because they say, hey, look, you attack us again, we'll shut this thing down again, and next time it'll be 2 months or something like that. And if they have the control and mechanisms in place, then they have that threat to hang it over. And of course, I can't imagine the United States or Europe or anybody else would be keen to have Iran have its hand, around that artery that they could squeeze it any time. But we don't have the military capacity to force them not to. So we're in a real bad situation.
On the 30th of March, Trump said that the US is in serious discussions with Iran, which could end our military operations. But Tehran continues to refute that. It says there are no talks with Washington. What is on Trump's mind? Is he planning to send ground troops to Iran, or is he looking to declare victory and end the war?